Gentlemen, honorable judges, on today's occasion, we will be debating on the motion this House refers the strategy of pushing an institutional reform to address police abuse and misconduct rather than defunding the police. I believe that the strategy of pushing for institutional reform to address police abuse and misconduct is essential for communities everywhere. But before we go on to today's motion, to better understand what we're talking about today, let's talk about the key phrases of today's motion. Let's start with the phrase defunding the police. What does that phrase actually mean? Well, there are multiple interpretations of defunding the police. The basic definition is to move funding away from police departments and into communities, resources such as mental health experts, housing, and social workers. In the larger scope of civil rights movement, some advocates would reallocate some police funding while keeping police departments. Others would combine the funding with the other police reforms such as body cameras and bias training. And others see defunding as a small step towards ultimately abolishing police departments and the prison system entirely. Police abuse as misconduct. This problem is widely known across the world. But what does that phrase actually mean? Police abuse as misconduct refers to any wrongful or improper actions taken by law enforcement officers while performing their duties. This can include excessive use of force, racial profiling, harassment, corruption, falsifying evidence, and other violations of civil rights and ethical standards, Such misconduct undermines trust in law enforcement and can have serious consequences for individuals and communities affected by it. And lastly, the strategy of pushing institutional reform to address policing abuse and misconduct. Rather than advocating and working towards changes within the structures and police of law enforcement organizations to prevent and to address instances of abuse and misconduct by police officers. This will involve implementing new procedures, training programs, oversight mechanisms, and accountability measures to ensure that police officers uphold professionality standards and treat communities fairly and respectfully. Continuing today's motion, police abuse and misconduct has been a world-known problem for a long time now. As we've seen too many times in the world, sometimes police kill or seriously injure people during arrests, fueled by racism. In countless other cases, police are quick to use force in response to protests or demonstrations. Throughout 2019 and 2020, for example, Hong Kong police have repeatedly deployed weapons like tear gas, rubber bullets in an unlawful way against protesters. All too often, police who kill and injure people are using force unlawfully and are not brought to justice. And because of that, thousands, maybe millions of innocent souls has suffered from police abuse and misconduct. We need to fix this problem. How? By pushing the strategy for institutional reform to address police abuse and misconduct. There are many reasons why advocating for institutional reform to address police abuse and misconduct is a more effective and sustainable way rather than simply defunding the police entirely. Just to say a few reasons. Number one, focused improvement. Institutional reform targets specific issues within law enforcement agencies such as training, accountability mechanisms, and community relations. This approach allows to target improvements while still maintaining essential policing functions. Number two, accountability. Reform measures can establish clearer mechanisms for holding officers accountable for their actions, ensuring that they are more professional and standard and ethical conduct. Number three, trust and confidence. Enhancing oversight and transparency can help rebuild trust between law enforcement agencies and communities they serve, fostering better relationship and cooperation. Fairness and justice. Reform efforts can aim to eliminate bias and discriminatory practices within police departments, promoting fairness and equal treatment under the law for all individuals regardless of race and ethnicity. Number five, improved training. Implementing reforms often involve enhancing officers' training for all individuals regardless of race or ethnicity. Number 6, and lastly, prevention of future misconduct by addressing system issues by implementing prevention measures. Institutional reform can reduce the likelihood of future instances of abuse and misconduct, ultimately promoting a safer and more just society. The strategy of pushing institutional reform to address police abuse and misconduct has numerous potential benefits rather than defunding the police directly. In fact, I can give you a couple of reasons why defunding the police would be a terrible idea for a strategy to use. Reason number one, maintaining public safety. Simply by defunding the police without implementing alternative strategies to public safety could lead to gaps in enforcement services, potentially compromising the whole public safety. Reason number two, long-term impact. One potential con of defunding the police department entirely is, in the long term, that it could lead to increases in crime rates, as reduced funding may result in lower resources for crime prevention, investigation, and community policing initiatives. This could potentially strain the ability of law enforcement to effectively address and deter criminal activity, negatively impacting public safety for community well-being over time. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable judges, in conclusion, pushing institutional reforms to address police abuse and misconduct is a way better and more efficient and sufficient strategy rather than defunding the police department entirely. Because of those reasons, I beg of you, honorable judges, to propose our motion.